there's a quiet ache settling into the spaces between us. It manifests as silence in a room where a conversation used to live, or the feeling that the person across from you speaks a language you've forgotten. Men and women alike carry this weight, wondering if the other side has changed or if we've simply drifted too far to find our way back. We look at that distance not as a wall, but as a wound that can be tended to. We need to be clear about how we do this work. The Velvet Verdict is a collaboration between human hearts and artificial intelligence. We use AI to map the terrain of social science with precision, sifting through data to find patterns that might otherwise stay hidden. But the human hand steers the ship, ensuring every insight is grounded in compassion and aimed at connection, not division. This hybrid approach lets us see the big picture without losing sight of the individual stories that make up our shared reality. We see a shared longing to bridge the gap. It's possible to face this isolation without letting it harden our hearts. We aren't here to point fingers or score points. The goal isn't to prove who's right or wrong. The goal is to find the hurt that keeps us isolated and offer a gentle direction toward healing. We believe that beneath frustration and fatigue, there's a deep desire on both sides to be understood and to understand. So, let's turn down the noise and turn up the empathy. Together, we'll explore how to rebuild trust, one honest step at a time, leaving blame behind and bringing our humanity back to the center of the conversation. If we are so hungry for each other, why does the space between us feel so wide? We don't need another debate about who started the drift. What we need is a clear-eyed look at the quiet erosion of everyday connection. On one side, many men have learned to carry their burdens in silence, mistaking stoicism for strength. On the other, many women have grown weary of carrying the emotional labor of relationships, mistaking exhaustion for failure. Neither side is wrong for protecting themselves. Both sides are simply tired of guessing what the other needs. The fracture isn't a war. It's a slow leak of unspoken expectations and the heavy weight of modern life pulling us apart. So, how do we stop the leak? We begin by naming the pattern without pointing a finger. We make room for the awkward, the vulnerable, and the imperfect. We trade the demand for perfection for the practice of patience. Healing doesn't require a grand gesture or a polished script. We acknowledge that this work is messy, and that's exactly where the healing begins. We hold both sides gently because isolation hurts us all, and connection is the only true remedy. It asks for small moments of showing up exactly as we are, meeting each other with grace. It means listening to understand rather than to defend, and speaking from experience rather than assumption. This is where we stand, not at an impasse, but at a threshold. The path forward isn't about fixing each other. It's about rebuilding the bridge we've been walking away from. When we choose curiosity over certainty and kindness over being right, we create a space where trust can take root again. That is the question we carry into this conversation, and it is the only one that truly matters. Today, the data shows the demographic shift. To understand the distance we feel, we must first look at the ground beneath our feet. The numbers tell a story of a shifting landscape, not a moral failing. Today, 3 in 10 U.S. adults are single, meaning they are not married, living with a partner, or in a committed relationship. This isn't a sudden storm, it's a slow tide that has been rising for generations. Over the past 3 decades, the share of adults ages 25 to 54 who are unpartnered has climbed sharply. Within that same group, the portion who have never been married has nearly doubled. We are seeing a record-high share of 40-year-olds in the U.S. who have never been married. These changes affect everyone, yet the path has diverged in ways that matter. For a long time, men and women moved in lockstep. In 1990, both sexes stood at 29% for being unpartnered among adults 25 to 54. But by 2019, a gender gap in being unpartnered had opened among that same age group. This divergence is the structural reality we are navigating. It is easy to look at these trends and feel that the other side is pulling away, or that the game has changed unfairly. But the data describes the wound. It does not assign blame. We are all living through a historic reconfiguration of how we live and love. Recognizing this shared structural shift is the first step toward healing. When we see that both men and women are adapting to the same new terrain, even if at different paces, we can stop seeing each other as the problem and start seeing each other as fellow travelers trying to find their way home. The map has changed. We need to draw it together. What? The data shows. The dating divide. The numbers reveal a simple truth. We are searching on different timelines. Single men are far more likely than single women to be currently looking for a relationship or dates. Among single adults in a 2022 survey, single men were more likely than single women to be seeking a committed relationship and/or casual dates. Age shapes this rhythm. Young men are far more likely than young women to describe themselves as single, while older single women are far more likely than older single men to say they aren't looking to date right now. Stepping back reveals a shared reality. The largest share of single Americans say they are not currently looking for a relationship or casual dates. This isn't a failure of effort. It reflects a broader pause. That pause shapes the modern dating landscape. Nearly half of U.S. adults say dating is now harder than it was 10 years ago. Women are much more likely than men to say dating has gotten harder in the last 10 years. Behind that difficulty lies friction that erodes trust. Women are far more likely than men to say someone they dated pressured them for sex. These numbers don't show enemies. They show two groups navigating uncertain waters, often misreading signals because safety and readiness are no longer defaults. The data describes the wound, but points toward a gentle way forward. Recognizing that mismatched pacing isn't rejection and heightened caution isn't coldness allows us to soften our expectations. Healing begins when we stop treating these statistics as proof of incompatibility and start seeing them as a request for clearer communication. We don't need to force old rules back. We just need to listen to what the landscape asks and meet each other with patience. What the data shows: the loneliness and intimacy gap. When we examine how this distance shows up in daily life, the numbers reveal quiet withdrawal rather than active conflict. Intimacy has shifted for everyone, though the contours differ by group. Past year sexlessness among young adults aged 18 to 29 has climbed, with that rise tracking much steeper for men than for women. At the same time, loneliness among U.S. adults remains slightly more common in women than in men. Yet age reveals a sharper divide. Younger men report feeling uniquely lonely compared with every other adult demographic. Across the board, serious loneliness, feeling isolated frequently or almost constantly, peaks among the young. These figures do not measure character failure. They simply map a shared wound. Vulnerability currently feels riskier than distance. Both men and women are instinctively protecting themselves, often by stepping back when they actually want to step closer. The data describes the gap. It does not prescribe how we bridge it. What it does suggest is that healing will not arrive through rigid expectations or assigned fault. Instead, it invites us to see withdrawal as fear wearing a quiet disguise. When a man pulls away, he may be guarding against rejection. When a woman holds distance, she may be protecting her peace. Both are trying to stay safe. If we treat these patterns as signals rather than verdicts, we can begin gently. We can name our own hesitations without demanding the other person perform certainty. We can trade pressure for curiosity, asking what kind of connection actually feels sustainable today. Trust rebuilds through consistent, low-stakes moments where both people feel allowed to be imperfect. The numbers show us drifting apart. They also leave quiet space for us to choose, patiently, to drift back together. What the data shows: shifting priorities. When we look at the map of modern life, the first thing that stands out is how the definition of a good life has quietly changed. Marriage, once the automatic center of gravity, now shares the stage with other deep commitments. How research tells us that relatively small shares of U.S. adults say being married is essential to a fulfilling life, while far larger shares point to an enjoyable career as that key ingredient. This isn't a failure of character, it's a shift in what we value. Both men and women are seeking purpose, stability, and joy, but the path to those things looks different now. We're not abandoning connection, we're redefining where it lives. This shift creates a landscape where men and women might be running on slightly different tracks. When priorities diverge, it's easy to mistake distance for indifference. But the data suggests we're navigating new terrain together, even if we're looking at different horizons. Alongside this change in life goals, a deeper divide is emerging in how young people see the world. Gallup data reveals a wide ideology gap has opened between young women and young men, ages 18-29. This isn't just about politics, it's about the stories we tell ourselves about safety, fairness, and the future. When worldviews drift, conversation can feel risky. We might worry that speaking up will only widen the rift. How do we bridge a gap when the map itself is changing? The answer lies in returning to the human beneath the headline. An ideological gap doesn't mean we're strangers, it means we're carrying different worries. Healing starts when we stop treating these differences as verdicts and start treating them as invitations. We can ask, "What made you see it that way?" instead of, "How can you think that?" This shift in posture doesn't require agreement, it requires curiosity and a willingness to sit with discomfort. When we acknowledge that both men and women are responding to real pressures, we create space for empathy. The data shows us drifting apart in priorities, in politics, but it doesn't dictate our hearts or our capacity for grace. We can choose to listen for the shared desire for dignity and belonging that underlies every worldview. Trust grows not when we erase our differences, but when we prove, again and again, that we can hold them without losing each other, building a bridge strong enough for both of us to walk. To walk that bridge, we must first acknowledge the heavy packs we're carrying. Healing begins when we step out of the courtroom and into the circle. Men, your frustration with rejection is real. When you reach out and hit a wall, it doesn't just sting, it can erode your sense of worth, making the risk of connection feel like a gamble you can't afford to lose. We honor the courage it takes to keep trying, despite the fear. Women, your fatigue with pressure is equally valid. You shouldn't navigate a minefield of expectations just to ask for kindness. The weight of managing other people's emotions, or feeling responsible for outcomes you didn't create, is exhausting. Your need for boundaries isn't a rejection of connection, it's a plea for a space where you can be seen without being consumed. We validate that exhaustion and we affirm your right to peace. Here's the truth that holds us together: neither side wants isolation. Beneath the frustration and the fatigue lies a shared, aching desire for safe, meaningful connection. Men want to be trusted and valued for who they are, not just what they provide. Women want to be heard and respected, not just managed or protected. We are all looking for a place where we can lower our shields without fear. The wound isn't our difference, it's that we've forgotten how to approach each other with softness. Healing doesn't require us to agree on everything. It asks only that we recognize the humanity in the other person's pain and choose, moment by moment, to respond with curiosity rather than defense. When we hold both sides with this kind of grace, we stop fighting the war and start building the home we both crave. The path forward isn't about fixing the other person, it's about rebuilding the bridges we've let rust. As a hybrid team of human empathy and AI, we see a way out that doesn't demand perfection, just presence. Social science suggests connection thrives where curiosity lives. Men and women alike, isolation often hardens when we stop asking questions and start assuming answers. Healing begins when we swap the script of suspicion for the simple act of wondering. What if her silence isn't rejection, but exhaustion? What if his withdrawal isn't indifference, but a struggle to find the right words? This curiosity must flow both ways, equally. Men and women both carry the burden of misunderstanding, and both hold the key to unlocking it. We must reclaim shared spaces, not just physical places, but mental rooms where both voices matter without either side needing to defend their territory. This means cultivating low-stakes interactions that remind us we're on the same team. Think of conversations that don't turn into debates, or community efforts where hands work together before minds argue. These spaces allow us to drop the armor we wear for protection and reveal the vulnerability that actually draws us closer. These small, daily repairs build the trust that grand gestures never could. Please hear us clearly, this is perspective, not therapy. We are here to offer a compass, not a cure. If the weight of isolation feels crushing, or if past wounds run too deep to navigate alone, please seek a licensed professional. Turning to experts is a profound act of self-respect, not a failure. Ultimately, rebuilding trust is a practice. It's choosing to see the person behind the pattern and extending a hand even when the grip feels uncertain. With this gentle courage, we close the distance and rediscover the quiet joy of being truly known. As we step back from the data and the patterns, let's remember the heart of why we're here. We believe the gap between men and women isn't a wall we can't climb, but a bridge we can rebuild, plank by plank. Isolation thrives in the shadows of assumption, but connection grows in the light of curiosity. Healing doesn't require us to erase our differences or pretend the hurt hasn't happened. It asks us to hold space for the vulnerability that brought us here. For men and women alike, the invitation is the same, to lower the shields just enough to let a genuine question pass through. Maybe it's asking, "What are you carrying today?" instead of assuming the worst. Maybe it's listening to the fear behind the frustration, recognizing that we are often fighting the same loneliness, just in different languages. Coming back together isn't a finish line we cross and leave behind. It's a rhythm we nurture day by day. Some days the connection feels steady, other days the wind blows hard and we need to hold on tighter. That's okay. Progress isn't a straight line. It's found in the small moments of grace, the text that checks in, the conversation that pauses before reacting, the willingness to admit when we've misunderstood. So, as you go from here, I invite you to reflect gently on one small step you can take this week. It might be a conversation you've been avoiding, or simply a moment of patience with yourself when the old habits flare up. Be kind to the process. You are worthy of connection, and you are capable of offering it. Thank you for walking this path with us. This episode was crafted by a human writer and AI collaborator, working together to bring clarity and compassion to the conversations that matter most.